Welcome to the first edition of The Pulse, brought to you by Paradigm. By way of introduction, my name is Joe Kruy and I work in institutional coverage at Paradigm. Previously, I was Vice President at JP Morgan on their equity derivative desk in London, and before that, I was working in derivatives at Deutsche Bank in New York. Before we begin, our hearts go out to everyone personally affected by the events this week. Without a doubt, a large setback for the space, but we'll keep moving forward and get through this difficult time together. So, what is the Pulse? The Pulse will be a concise segment, a few minutes each week around major flows in the crypto derivatives markets. We understand that the main value add of Paradigm from a content perspective is we see the largest blocks going up in the crypto vol space. So we will discuss the largest blocks that we're seeing and themes around these flows. That being said, this is not going to be a discussion in depth around vol parameters that already exists on Twitter and some of our partners do a great job with. Rather, how do these metrics relate to the block flows that we see in both options and futures? But this will be a flow-centric segment. Lastly, this is very much a work in progress. We want to hear what you, the viewer, wants to see. As an example, eventually we might look to have some market makers on Paradigm join us to discuss their views on the market. But jumping right in, starting in on Bitcoin blocks, here are the largest Bitcoin option trades on Paradigm since Monday. Really no surprise here given the turmoil in the market that the majority of the taker interest that we have seen has been buying of downside. There's nothing to talk about around how vol parameters are driving the flow. No, it's rather just a sense of panic around the potential fallout that might come. The major prints that we saw being the November 18,000 puts in 1,200 times, the DEAS 10K, 15K put spread in 1,000 times, and then the November 18,000 puts that were bought 1,100 times earlier in the week, but were actually sold to close today after the CPI rally. We did see some interest in outright upside, but the majority of the large blocks have definitely focused on the downside. What has been interesting to see, as these flows have been going through, is that some dealers earlier in the week were actually quite axed to sell the downside, as we sense a few of these big market makers got quite long vol when BTC vols were trading in the 50s, and they finally had an opportunity to monetize these positions after bleeding away due to the poor realized. The charts here show the strike in maturity distribution of block trades over Paradigm and settled on Deribit. So this is not including all of the Deribit flows that go up on screens, rather only includes prints that just hit Paradigm. And as alluded to on the last side, the largest block interest definitely occurred on the downside and in November and December expiries to protect from a continued sell-off. Moving on to the Ethereum side of things, the top 3 blocks on Paradigm over the week also occurred on the downside via outright puts and a bearish risk reversal. This is actually quite rare in Ethereum options, but certainly not something that we're surprised about, given the circumstances of the market. Like, we remember the pre-merge days when all the major interest, all the largest blocks that we were seeing were actually occurring in strikes 100% higher than spot. You might recall all those December and March call flies that were trading centered around the 3,000 strikes as well as 1/2 call ratios. Well, certainly those days look like they're gone now. And similarly, here's the strike and maturity distribution for Ethereum. While some decent activity in upside strikes, a significant amount also trading below 1250 now as well. Similar to Bitcoin, the most active maturities were on the front end of the curve. Like I said, you compare that to the pre-merge days when all the major blocks were occurring 6 months to 9 months out the curve. And just finishing up with Solana, quite light activity outside some rolls and in cleaning up some exposure. Take note that Deribit tweeted a couple days ago that they're not going to be listing new Solana options or futures until further notice, given the recent spot action. That concludes the first segment of The Pulse. Thanks for watching and stay safe out there.